This sitting is resumed.
Order number 10, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security, to move the second reading of the Three Houses Spring Management and Control Bill 2023.
Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I wish to thank all members of this honorable chamber for allowing me to draw on their time as I seek to give you 4, possibly 5 hours of presentation on what has transpired at Three Houses Spring and River Plantation. But if I may be so minded that we all have busy schedules, that time can very well be reduced to an hour and a half or 2. Mr. Speaker, when I reflect on my days as a boy growing up in St. Philip, being very cognizant of the location at River and the Three Houses Spring, where we as boys would travel from Church Village to walk to Three Houses Spring. Yes. Yes. It's the Three Houses Spring Management and Control Act and the BADMC amendment, which, Mr. Speaker, will be a cognitive debate. And they are inextricably linked.
The question is that those two bills be treated as a cognate debate. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think yes. Continue, honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So as we traverse from Church Village to Three Houses, where we would go to the spring, 1 for recreation, 2 to fish, and 3 explore Three Houses, I believe I'm in the ideal position to speak to 1, what used to be at Three Houses Spring and River Plantation, and what is currently the case at River Plantation. Now, as a boy, having experienced River and Three Houses, River by dint of its name is a place that is prone to flooding, and Three Houses, the plantation, when we were pretty much involved in a sugar industry that saw all of Barbados planted up in sugarcane. It is important to note that we need to come to terms with our reality, sir. And so therefore the effort on my part really is to seek to bring justice to what is happening at River, particularly as it relates to the Three Houses Spring. Now, we didn't just arrive at this position, Mr. Speaker, and so therefore I wish to use this opportunity to thank my permanent secretary, who is here with us, and indeed the CEO acting of BADMC, for being on this journey with us to be able to get this bill before Parliament. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I believe that there are times in our life when we have to reflect, particularly when we know the genesis of what we're dealing with. And when I search my soul to determine what it is that I can use as an anchor for where I stand on this issue, I referred to Drummond, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, "I shall pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show to any human being, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again," unquote. And I think, Mr. Speaker, you will understand and appreciate that having been raised by the people of Church Village and indeed St. Philip, and being part of a culture where farming is at the core of their very existence, this opportunity that has been given to me and the honor to serve in this honorable chamber to represent that which is right by the people of St. Philip is about fitting for me to refer to Drummond. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have a situation at River where previously, and this is prior to climate change, water would flow throughout that stream all the way down to a catchment called Bronx Pond. And in those days, really, dating back to the 18th century, there were never major challenges in terms of water damming or water flow, because at the time when this legislation was passed, this is the second piece of legislation that would have been passed in the Parliament, but the first one that was really proclaimed. And Mr. Speaker, this legislation basically spoke to how the stream was supposed to be used and how people were supposed to behave. There's something along that stream called riparian rights. And riparian rights refer to people who live or own property along the stream, who had an entitlement to access the water from the stream for a total of either 8 or 40 hours in a given day. But at no time should the stream be obstructed to the extent that the flow of the water is discontinued. And therefore, farming along that area, particularly livestock farming, was allowed and without any restrictions for access to water. At the time, the legislation also allowed for commissioners to be appointed and magistrate police to be appointed to manage the functioning of the stream. Those days, sir, are over. We have no such arrangement in place, and therefore you would find that what obtains now at River will be that those people, the riparian owners, still have access to the water. The farmers upstream still have access to the water, and those downstream may or may not get water, depending on the time of the year. And you will be fully aware that at this time of the year where we are going through the drought period, and with the vicissitudes of climate change, you would find that the flow in itself is less. Because of the constant clearing of the stream, it has expanded the stream. And then, on top of all of that, sir, the upstream farmers would seek to create dams within the stream. So what would happen is that the stream has a natural flow. You bring a piece of heavy equipment, you dig out a catchment area, sometimes 6 feet, sometimes 8 feet, 10 feet. That water first has to flow into that catchment area before it can overflow and continue its natural course. And then, were that not bad enough, sir, you also have a situation where private owners would seek to create their own dams for purposes of recreation and other things. Now, Mr. Speaker, obviously, when we were in good times, when we had a stronger flow coming down the stream, this may not have posed a major threat to the existence of the farmers in the area. But as time went by and we started to battle with climate change, things changed. Now, Mr. Speaker, I recall seeing repeatedly in the press farmers at River and St. Philip complaining about access to water for farming. I do also recall, Mr. Speaker, sir, where many of the people who live between Bayfield, St. Catherine's, Marley Vale, Bushy Park, Vineyard, and Sanford would from time to time complain that something must have gone radically wrong for the stream to slow down the way it did and for the farmers downstream to be impacted the way they are impacted. This, of course, carried on for decades. We know that this act dates back to over 300 years. And I heard the Honourable member for St. Michael South speaking about dated legislation. But I'm yet to find peace on our books that can be as dated as this one. And I think that we really need to do right by the people of Barbados. And so the type of work that we had to put in to make this legislation relevant to contemporary existence, sir, was absolutely necessary. The dated legislation spoke to fines in pounds or pence. It spoke to commissioners and police magistrates and those types of things which are practically non-existent now. And sir, as a man lettered in law, were you to read that legislation, you would have to take a breath and wonder where they were going without full stops and commas and colons and those types of things. And really and truly, interpretation of law at that time must have been very difficult because the subjective nature of it, especially given the way the language was constructed, could have led to many different interpretations. And that's why the importance of punctuation in law is necessary. Now, I'm not lettered in law, but I feel that from what I've seen, particularly as a businessman, and what I've had to deal with, it makes perfect sense to me that interpretation is important. And so there was no suitable fit, Mr. Speaker, for that type of legislation at all in our current existence. And therefore, we engaged a consultant, one of Barbados's finest, and I know that I shouldn't really call the name, but one of Barbados's finest. And we met with the riparian owners along the stream, in addition to all the farmers at River Plantation, well, all those who showed up, because I may very well hear after this, or they didn't talk to me. So all those who showed up, if I am to get my language correct. And Mr. Speaker, we had 2 sessions plus a final session in order for us to share what the plans were, and at the same time, allow for us to take feedback from the riparian owners and from the farmers at River. Having done all of that, we were then able to settle on what this legislation was going to be and how we would seek to get the Attorney General's certificate so we can pass this through Cabinet and be here to present this on the behalf of the people of St. Philip and indeed the people who do farming at River Plantation. Mr. Speaker, there is no joke when I tell you that when we were part of the opposition in this honorable chamber, we had a program called Rubbing Shoulders. And one day, a Rubbing Shoulders visit was taken to River Plantation to see what was happening up there with the farmers. And most of those farmers told us about the way the stream was being blocked, the way the stream was being used for recreational purposes, the way farmers created diversions to the stream, the way pumps were being placed in the stream for prolonged hours, the way the stream was being polluted, sir, and more importantly, the way the farmers downstream were losing their crops because the water wasn't flowing into Bronx Pond. We actually had to use trucks at one time, Mr. Speaker, to move water up the river to fill Bronx Pond so that farmers can get access to water. Such was the struggle of those farmers at River. On that Rubbing Shoulders visit, we gave the assurance that if we were to come to government, this nonsense had to stop. We also gave the assurance that what is good for one must be good for the other, and that all of them must be able to exist in harmony with access to the water at Three Houses Spring. Mr. Speaker, coming out of that, we made a decision that we had to do right by the farmers who exist at River Plantation. A river plantation is a plantation of 400 acres of land. There are just about 100 farmers who are registered to farm at River, and there is some 60 acres of land that is currently in cultivation. But because of the limited access to water, we cannot yet get all 400 acres in production, and that is sad. Mr. Speaker, you would hear me on more than one occasion speak in this honorable chamber about access to land and the challenges we are facing with water, and that any farmer or individual who must enjoy access to water from Three Houses Spring to the disadvantage and detriment or loss of investment of farmers downstream is absolutely wrong. As a matter of fact, there is a simple injustice in all of this. And therefore, we could not sit idly by and watch this situation continue. Many of the farmers would call me 3, 4 o'clock in the morning when they're going out to say, we haven't received water coming down the stream. I am going to go and check. I will do a video and I will send it to you. And I can tell you without fear of contradiction, and I'm not going to call the farmers' names, but they will all go and remove concrete blocks, plywood, pipes, all types of things that were used to block the stream from its natural flow. The BADMC had up a sluice gate up there with a camera, and that was completely ignored. Camera was taken out of commission. Water diverted from that sluice gate to the other side of the stream, Mr. Speaker, so that those farmers who have leased private land can get access to water, and to the deprivation of those who are actually legitimately on lands managed by the BADMC. And Mr. Speaker, when we became government, we placed priority on how we can actually right this wrong. And therefore, the Prime Minister, with her team, and I and my team, we revisited River. And I kid you not, Mr. Speaker, those farmers were so happy to see her because they were accustomed to seeing me, and I suppose the choice between her and me, they would obviously go for her, because I will never be able to stand, Mr. Speaker, in her shoes when it comes to confronting these issues and being brutally frank about how we have to deal with them. Well, Mr. Speaker, one farmer came up and he started to complain. And I saw tears. You know how we have these emojis where people laugh and the tooth ears flying up the side of the eyes? I saw the man crying with the tears popping out the side of his eyes because he was so happy to see that we came there to bring relief to them after he had lost about an acre of okras, pumpkins, etc., during the drought season. And we made a promise that we would repeal this act to make sure that we can bring justice to what is taking place at River. Because many times, when the stream was blocked, to be very honest, I would say to the extension officer, and the acting CEO of BADMC can bear me out on this, go and report the matter to the police. Take the evidence and go to the police. But the police really couldn't do anything either, because the law in its present form required a police magistrate or one of the commissioners to be able to take action, and we had none of them. And then, Mr. Speaker, we also asked the extension officers and the team to travel the natural course of the spring to determine wherever there is a block, we should remove it. But that in itself is literally an impossible task. Because to walk that entire stream, sir, to search for where people have set up blocks along the stream can take not only a couple of days, but it can be at fairly high risk. And high risk because, one, you may have to traverse private owners' property, and they had no authority to do that. And then equally, you had to also be wary of the fact that people may use the opportunity to vent their feelings about the blocks that are in the stream that were about to be removed, and this can result in conflict that no one wants to have to deal with. We feel that the way to settle all of this then would have been to come with contemporary legislation, Mr. Speaker, that would allow for everybody to be able to function at river and have an opportunity and a fair chance to maintain their crops and protect the investment that they were putting in. Now, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security has a lot of agricultural programs currently going on. If I were to ask anybody what is the biggest challenge that we face in delivering for the farmers in Barbados, I think most people will get it right. I am convinced that 99.9% of the people that we ask will get it right. Because the biggest problem that we face is the same problem that we're currently facing for domestic consumption of water, and that is water for the farmers. Now, I have read, even in today's newspaper, I have read extensively, Mr. Speaker, on issues relating to water. People have spoken about desalination. People have spoken about water reuse. People have spoken about the same springs. As a matter of fact, if you were to listen to the call-in programs, Mr. Speaker, I would say dating back some 10 years. And then there was another time when I was a lot younger, I would listen to a program called Tell It Like It Is. And there was a gentleman called the Cement Man. And these gentlemen who called the call-in programs all articulated very well that, one, we should go to water catchments in order for us to support agriculture in Barbados, and that is what this government has done, you know. When I calculated the amount of money that we can end up spending, and I've said this before, in order for us to provide water for the farmers in Barbados, you're talking well over $100 million. And this government has set about to provide water for the farmers of Barbados by doing the catchments. We have phase one at River. Phase two is to go by the hot pond at Three Houses Spring. And then we've done all the others, and we are doing drilling at the north of the island rather than do catchments, because you still have to have water to fill the catchment. But this spring is about the perfect example that you can find, sir, for us to be able to do a catchment and use the natural flow of the water to fill the pond and allow for people to have an irrigation system that allows for everybody to get water. Mr. Speaker, the changes that we made to the legislation were not made to disadvantage anyone at all. As a matter of fact, I can very well argue, and everyone who understands the culture in St. Philip and who's prepared to take a side for or against will all say one thing: this legislation is fair to everybody. And it is fair, sir, because people would just tell you, man, knock down everything, leg it up, let the water flow, man, break up everything and don't care about certain people. This legislation isn't doing that, you know. What this legislation is doing is allowing for the intent of where the first piece of legislation was going, and that is to continue to allow the riparian owners to have access to the water. But what it is also doing, it is allowing now for a management system to be put in place through the BADMC so that they can take full management control of the river plantation and in particular the management of that spring. Mr. Speaker, previously, if an extension officer had gone on anybody's private land, that extension officer would be in severe trouble. If an extension officer dared to tell anyone on their private property, you have to discontinue your catchment for a period of time, that extension officer could very well find himself in danger. This management program literally allows now for these officers of the BADMC to give 3 days notice and to say, we are coming to see what arrangement you have going on there so that we can make sure that the water can continue to flow down to Browns Pond. Now, Browns Pond, as we know it, in the 1713 legislation, was the final point to where that water is supposed to go so that you can avoid flooding of the area. And I said earlier that the area by dint of its name, river, was prone to severe flooding. As a matter of fact, some 7 or 8 years ago, the river was so flooded out that people had to use these little dinghies to be able to get through there in order to get to their land. So that is the nature of the place. So that Browns Pond must be able to collect water. And that's the reason why we expanded it to the extent that it can take 6 million gallons of water. But at the same time, use the wells close by in order for the water to flow off into the wells. I find it impossible, sir, that that stream is still flowing, but the water is having a difficulty getting to Browns Pond. And therefore, it tells me that there is some act that is taking place upstream that must be dealt with. Mr. Speaker, when this legislation is passed, the officers of the BADMC will now take full control of the entire river construct. And anybody that is blocking that stream will be dealt with accordingly. It is not going to be a case where there is going to be any acrimony, because the legislation is very clear. You may do so for 8 and 40 hours accordingly. But if you have a permanent structure, Mr. Speaker, sir, one that is there where the water is constantly flowing in on a 24-hour basis, that has to stop, sir. When I looked at the stream, I saw all different sized pipes going in to the natural flow of water. Mr. Speaker, you don't have pipes in the natural flow of a stream or a river, of a spring. The fact that we can have 8-inch pipes going through a tunnel and under a bridge to divert the water from the stream is wrong. And whilst I may agree that perhaps in order to allow an owner along the stream to have access to catchments for the water, that arrangement now has to be settled by the BADMC and the engineers to determine what size pipes can be used. And they must make sure that all times they are doing right by the people, because the legislation also allows for compensation. So that if an officer takes it upon himself to be rude or feel that he must be hostile and he damages the people's property or their crop, there are consequences. So nobody can tell me when I walk away from here, or tell the honourable member for St. Philip North when she passes through, man, you all didn't do right by me because now all of a sudden we want to put this thing in place where we can't block the water. Well, you can't block the water because you're not supposed to block the water. And all of the farmers, those from St. Philip North, St. John, St. George, some from Christ Church, those from my constituency, sir, will now have access to water through an irrigation system that is going to be put in place by the BADMC. Sir, there will also be the introduction of sluice gates along the stream so that we can control the flow of the water. Now, I know many of you may know I went to Guyana and I saw a sluice gate in operation. It's a fascinating thing. I also saw it in the Panama Canal as well, where you allow for the water to build up and build up and build up, and then you release, and it goes to the next gate, and you build up and build up, and then you release. It's a fantastic thing. Well, Mr. Speaker, if we are not able to do these things, sir, the day will only come when somebody will decide that they're going to take action and take the law into their hands. And we are not here to allow for that to happen. Now, Mr. Speaker, we were very detailed in how we are going to go about this legislation, and that is why we took the time to meet with the owners and the farmers. And I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that nothing in this legislation can result in any severe criticism at all. As a matter of fact, I feel that when I go to St. Philip later, I may find myself being an unsung hero, because the amount of people that came to me, businessmen and otherwise, telling me that I must, as Minister of Agriculture, do something about this situation at River. I believe that it is timely, especially in this drought period, sir, especially at a time when we have to ration water, at a time when we are told by the Met Office that we are going to go through this period till possibly July, then I feel that it is timely that we respond. And therefore, this presentation this afternoon, this honourable chamber, is nothing but doing right by the people in St. Philip and particularly at River Plantation. Mr. Speaker, the legislation would also have regulations, and the provision of the regulations will be made in order for us to be able to deliver a number of things. One, types, size, and specification of pipes and pumps to be used for the abstraction of water from the spring. The use of water from the spring and the prioritization of its use. The rate of abstraction of water from the spring. The rates and charges for use of water from the spring. The exemption of persons from the payment of rates and charges for the use of water from the spring. And I've already mentioned who those persons are: owners of property where the stream runs through or adjacent. Special rates and charges payable in respect of the use of water and given effect to this bill generally. Now, Mr. Speaker, under the regulations, the minister may make penalties to a maximum of $1,000 or imprisonment for a period of 18 months. The regulations are also subject to negative resolution. Now, Mr. Speaker, I must tell you and I must let all Barbados know that there are also consequences for people who are prepared to get in the way, block the BADMC, stop the officers from carrying out their duties, and really and truly seek to prohibit the functioning of the officers. And a person found guilty of undertaking any of the specified activities is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $25,000 or 2 years imprisonment or both. Mr. Speaker, I do recall my officers sharing with me on many occasions the risk that they face in having to work at river and dealing with this water issue. And therefore, I think that what we have done, first of all, and I really want to underscore this because I don't want the wrong message to be conveyed. We didn't sit down and come up on our own with these. It is the owners and farmers who determine with us that these are the types of fines that they want to see. It is the owners along the stream and the farmers who suggested to us that we must stop people from polluting the water and that there must be a system through which the water can be tested. This, Mr. Speaker, is extremely important because coming down that stream into Bronx Pond will be live shrimp. We cannot afford to have the water polluted or contaminated in any way. Mr. Speaker, there's a mechanism for settlement of disputes, and therefore, there will be an oversight committee, mediators, and the possible engagement of the High Court. This is an important requirement that a party who is in dispute must notify the permanent secretary responsible for agriculture in writing of the existence of a dispute in order to commence the process of dispute settlement. The permanent secretary must forward correspondence to the chairman of the oversight committee within 3 days of receipt. The chairman of the oversight committee was agreed to be the general manager of the Barbados Water Authority, given the fact, one, we just agreed to an agricultural water rate. We agreed that all water management issues should be with the Barbados Water Authority, and that the BADMC, even though it had its own irrigation construct, they too had to work with the Barbados Water Authority in terms of being able to manage and implement the agricultural water rate. So, Mr. Speaker, there is going to be a fully implemented management system with an oversight committee, and therefore, anybody with a grievance should be able to get that grievance heard, and as I said, if not satisfied, this can go all the way to the High Court. Mr. Speaker, the farmers at River Plantation, this legislation provides for our BADMC tenants and lessees to extract water from Bronx Pond for irrigation purposes only, subject to the terms and conditions agreed between these persons and the corporation. The bill itself, Mr. Speaker, will see, in order for us to be able to effectively manage this, that we needed to make an amendment to Cap 254 to allow for the BADMC Act to be amended to insert where the BADMC shall now be responsible for the management and control of the Tree Houses Spring and Tree Houses Plantation. So, Mr. Speaker, if I were to go through now the bill itself, sir, in order to give you a feel for what the bill is and to give all Barbadians a feel for where we are, the objects and reason of the bill is A, the management and control of the spring known as Tree Houses Spring; B, the categories of persons entitled to use the spring; C, the role and functions of the Barbados Agricultural Development and Marketing Corporation in respect of management of the spring; the settlement of disputes relating to the use of the spring; the repeal and replacement of the Tree Houses Spring Act 1713(1), and all related matters. The first section is the description of Tree Houses Spring. The second carries a map of the spring and the third schedule, refers to the riparian owners. Mr. Speaker, the BADMC will be the management entity under CAP 254 amendment, and this means that the Barbados Water Authority, which has an established bill, Water Authority Act CAP 274, must also be part of this process. And therefore, we believe that with the Barbados Water Authority being part of the process and the BADMC being the management entity, that we have done fair by everybody involved. Sir, the role and function of the BADMC shall be maintain the proper alignment of the spring, keep and maintain registers of all persons entitled to abstract and use water from the spring, measure and regulate the flow of water from the spring, and establish the volume of distribution of water to maintain adequate water levels in the spring, regulate the manner in which water may be extracted from the spring and where the BADMC considers it necessary, install sluice gates or similar contrivances or devices to control the volume of flow of water, ensure the regular cleaning of the spring and areas surrounding the spring, transfer water from the spring to such channels, ponds, or reservoirs as may be deemed necessary or expedient, regulate the distribution of water from the spring among the persons entitled to receive and use water, take prompt action to prevent or rectify pollution of the spring, carry out tests to analyze the quality of the water, cause the abatement of any nuisance, and finally, establish water rates for the extraction and use of the water from the spring after consultation with the BWA. Mr. Speaker, there's a caveat. In the case of emergencies, there's an exception, sir. Where the BADMC is satisfied that the spring is in danger of its water being depleted or that there is an imminent threat to the spring, the BADMC may do all necessary to protect and preserve the spring. Where the Bronx Pond becomes flooded, the BADMC shall take such measures as are necessary or expedient, including channeling excess water into wells south of Bronx Pond to alleviate the effectiveness of the flooding and to protect the crops and livestock of tenants and lessees of riparian owners or the BADMC. Sir, under this arrangement, the BADMC shall serve no notice, but will report after under cases of emergency. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that this legislation in itself would have modernized what was currently in place. And here's the part, sir, Mr. Speaker, that all should be satisfied that we have done right by the people at River. Persons entitled to use water. A person shall be entitled to use the water from the spring free of charge for the purposes of, and I want to be very clear, entitled to use the water for the purposes of shorebird hunting, model boat racing, fishing, maintenance of a bird or wildlife sanctuary, bathing or religious practices. And these, of course, are subject to any regulations made under this Act for riparian owners, lessees, tenants, licensees of riparian owners, and persons claiming title from the riparian owners. Mr. Speaker, this bill, sir, is, to my mind, one of the finest pieces of legislation that brings justice, first of all, for a class of people who always felt as though they were being ignored, and when hitherto, never felt as though there would ever be any justice coming their way. These are ordinary people from all walks of communities across St. Philip, St. George, St. John, Christchurch. My constituency, the Honourable Member for St. Philip West constituency, the Honourable Member for St. Philip North constituency, the Honourable Member for St. John. And, Mr. Speaker, I believe that we had to do this in order for us to be able to settle these problems that were taking place at River. And, sir, I sincerely hope that when this passes through the upper chamber, that we should be able to get this in place as fast as possible, because this act shall come into operation on a date to be fixed by proclamation, sir. And so, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I beg to move that this bill be read.
Honourable Member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really have a short intervention, mainly because I am the parliamentary representative for St. Philip North, and it really would be remiss of me not to speak on this bill. I remember, Mr. Speaker, one of my first interventions in Parliament involved the conversation about the damming of the actual spring by one of my constituents. At that time, you would almost want to say it was angry at the fact that this constituent proceeded to dam the stream, and the honourable members for St. Philip South made it sound very pleasant at the time, but proceeded to dam the stream so that for recreational purposes, i.e., what I consider to be a lake in the middle of St. Philip North with a lake house and all the attendant pieces of equipment to it. So I am more than welcoming this piece of legislation. I really don't have any issues, just one small issue which will come at the end of my presentation. I just want to agree with the honourable member who presented that this would be a welcome relief for the farmers indeed of St. Philip North and those outside of St. Philip North who have been complaining. I've learned a lot from his presentation, mainly the fact that I pay special attention to was the rubbing shoulders in my constituency. Perhaps I was on vacation or something. I never remember going to these rubbing shoulders in my constituency, but I'm glad to learn of them, that and the other intervention from the honourable member. And I hope next time to be invited. I live and work at one point at that time within a hop, skip, and a jump of the area, and I was very surprised to hear him mention that rubbing shoulders happened up there with the farmers. So I beg of him to include me the next time. I'm not necessarily a farmer, but I'm sure I could find a pair of boots to come with you. And in fact, I walked a lot of the area on the stream. This is how I can tell you about the damming of the stream. I am aware of the agricultural businesses that go on, including animal husbandry, the cows and so on, in my constituency. But I am grateful for the bill. I just want to speak about some of the things that happen in St. Philip North, which I am very much aware of. That area of the Three Houses Spring is becoming an area that is really well patronized by all members of the public, from as far as St. Lucie to the tip of St. Philip in terms of the park, Three Houses Park, and with the attendant stream. As a girl, I was not privileged like the honourable member to be able to walk around and visit streams. Girls just never did that. But listening to my brother and indeed my father who is now 91 years old, will be able to tell me about the activities that carried on within the spring. For instance, fishing for crayfish. Time has done something to that. I have seen in my 51 years of life one crayfish. And to me, that is a measure of the pollution that could be happening, the various activities along the stream. One of the things I do not like to see, members of the public tend to wash their cars along the banks of the stream. And with that comes not only dust, but oils and grease, which of course are harmful to the few wildlife that we know that now exists within the stream. Apart from that, and I was told that it was back in the day, it was an area for socialization. People wash their clothes, people bathe. And in fact, the Rastafarian community, both religious purposes and hygiene purposes, they actually use the spring for baths. And we are now seeing members of the Muslim community using that area as well, and we welcome them, of course, to St. Philip North. The opportunities for business, of course, exist from one end of the spring all the way to the others. I remember horticultural business being there, selling plants and flowers, and in fact, many of the plants that I own now came out of that, the old Tree Houses plantation. He's no longer there, and that's the issue I wish to discuss with the honourable member outside of these chambers. But there is vast opportunity for that. The prospect that the honourable member mentioned of aquaculture in the area is very exciting to me, at least in my mind. To have shrimp in the area, to have crayfish back, there must be a few hanging around that we can capitalize on, and that could only add to the betterment of the country in terms of food reserves. And I'm very excited on that end. Some of the things that came out to me off the paper when they read the legislation, the Honourable Prime Minister is here, so I want to say a paper off my computer screen, was the fact that, and not paper, was the fact that we are putting measures in place to keep up regular cleaning of the spring. And I so welcome that. This is an area along the spring that I would traverse. It's on hot note every morning to go to St. Catherine's School to provide breakfast. And I was well aware all along about when the damming took place. In fact, I took pictures when there was absolutely no water coming through. I probably still have them. And sometimes it was just overgrown. So I'm happy that that will be looked into, regular cleaning. The fact that we will now begin testing of the water is also a big relief, bearing in mind that children often wade, adults wade in the spring. And please note that I do not say swim. You cannot learn to swim in the spring. And I will bring this up till I get what I need to get for St. Philip and St. George and the other communities. But members of the public really don their bathing suits and have a fun day when they picnic within the pond, within the spring, the stream. So I am happy that we will be doing testing, not only for human purposes, but for the small population of fish that exists within the pond and the agricultural grounds that exist within the pond. The honourable member responsible, honourable member for Christchurch West Central, I will take up his mantle when I talk about ecosystems and so on within that stream. Well, okay. While I say that, I want to just put a plug into water wastage. There are areas that the ministry has provided irrigation that often leak. In fact, honourable member, through you, Mr. Speaker, I had reported a leak near me about 3 weeks ago, and the grass is growing, the only part in my property that is growing very green and lush. So I hope it can be addressed very, very soon. It's not on my end, I'm not paying for it, but that is for the betterment of the country. So we'll discuss that. So it would be good to maintain the pipes and address any areas of leakages and so on. We are now a water scarce country that is really, really, really suffering. I will soon be finished. My interventions are not usually long. One of the things that popped out at me also was the mention of shorebird hunting in tandem with a nature reservoir. I just don't see how it meshes, one, and two, being somewhat of an environmentalist, the fact that shorebird hunting is there is bothering me a little bit. One, do we have an overpopulation of birds? The only thing I'm seeing coming up there now are parrots, but I can't say they're overpopulated. Two, a lot of the birds passing through the area are migratory that add a lot to the environment, whether it be their eggs when they hatch, that's calcium for the grounds. Remember, you're shaking your head. Whether it be by mixing up the soils, Yeah, whether it be all of that. So the fact that we have something here from the old legislation that speaks about shore bird fishing bothers me a bit. I don't know what kind of ammunition we use, but our might research things like lead can pollute the soil, can pollute the water, and lead poisoning in adults is very, very, very dangerous, much less a pregnant mother or a child that uses the agricultural products from these areas. So I encourage you, if it's not too late, to have a look at that part of it. And I know a lot of people will be with me right now. The fight is on with the monkeys. Monkeys against human, I would hate to think it's shorebirds, many of them migratory against us. I had a look at the members of the Oversight Committee, which I am in full agreement with, but I am wondering if it may not be worthwhile to put an environmentalist on that committee, somebody that will lend guidance to how we basically treat the spring and the water. And of course, have a representation on the committee that represents not only the larger landowners. I had the fortune of getting in a vehicle with one of our more, what should I say, vanilla-minded members of the community, and was shown, this is the closest I got to realizing what Jesus felt. I was put in the back of a car and showed these are the 400 acres that we own, and all of this is mine. I am hoping on this committee that this committee will have representation from maybe the smaller landowners, that they will certainly have a voice. I am seeing the members of the riparian community, and a lot of them on my research are actually large, very large landowners in the area. If my colleague from the St. Michael, East, from St. Michael East were here, or he's probably listening to me, he would be kind of taken aback of one of the names here that has been given a bit of trouble in several ministries. And I do not digress any further on that. Other than to say I am happy with the legislation except for the two things that I have mentioned, or one or two things that I've mentioned, and I hope it solves many of the issues. My hope is that we not only pass it, but we implement it. We have seen a lot of legislation pass, and I veer a little bit here. For instance, the breathalyzer test, that nothing is happening. A good friend of mine had got an accident the other night, and if it gets the law courts, I don't know what happened. So I want to see this legislation actually implemented, that we could. I have reservations on the compliance of one of these landowners, and I'm hoping that with this legislation we can actually say, all right, you have done wrong, you'll be charged, you'll be fined, whatever. So I hope it comes to the fore, regardless of their financial standing, regardless of the acreage that they actually own, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of the amount of melanin they have in the skin. I am hoping that when it reaches the other chamber that this is passed with flying colors, and I congratulate the honourable member for St. Philip South for bringing it. It's long in coming, but thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for St. Philip South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to thank the honourable member who has, in her typical style, defended her constituents. And I am very proud to note that we have such a member sitting in this honourable chamber, sir. Just to bring clarity to a couple of things raised. The rubbing shoulders exercise took place when we were in opposition, before all of our candidates were settled. And therefore, it would have been nice to have you then, but I think you were nominated well after that, rubbing shoulders. The one that took place when I became minister, you were absent, and for that, yes, I agree that we will endeavor in future to make sure that you are everyone, including having your name on the plaque for the opening of the Bronx Barn. As far as the maintenance is concerned, I agree, and there's going to be a full maintenance program to make sure that we don't have debris and those sorts of things in the stream, pollutants, copper and those sorts of things that you mentioned. It's going to be a full maintenance program. The issue with birds, the tree houses spring ran in such a way that it made its way all the way down to a place called Wiltshires. And then there was another stream by Wiltshires where water no longer gets down to Wiltshires for some reason. We got to find out why. And when this is passed, I think we'll be able to enter the premises of persons along that area to find out if what the residents and the people who know the area is telling us is true. Well, we can't test it yet until this is passed. But a lot of migratory birds will come down there. And really and truly, I enjoyed seeing them. I know people who went out and took photographs, etc., and have these various species of birds. The Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central would tell you that he has absolutely no problems because of Barbados's biodiversity. But there are times when it is fully accepted that bird shooting is something that takes place. It is a special type of bird. It's not the type of bird that would in any way cause us to have any alarms. Just like people eat chicken, they eat birds. I would get the species and let you know. But there are some birds that they use, and when they're having their swamp side parties and Saturday recreation, etc., those birds are the type of birds. Just like chicken, just like duck, just like anything else. You know, when people have a certain palate, they tend to go towards certain things. But I don't see that to be really a major challenge because this is not an everyday thing. And it's probably not an every weekend thing either. I take the point about pollutants. This is something that the Ministry of Environment, my colleague and I are working on, and we will continue to do so. There's a project that is coming out on the FAO that we will sign off on soon that allow us to continue to do that kind of work. Soil management and protection of the environment is something that is high on our agenda. But I thank you for raising those points nonetheless. As far as the committee is concerned, the committee really is a committee for settling disputes, and you are absolutely right. The owners along that stream are people with large tracts of land. There are no small people around there. And that was so long before our time. The small people really are the farmers who would fall under the BADMC, and it's the BADMC that has the management control. So I am absolutely confident that the BADMC will do whatever it takes to look after the interests of those small farmers who have 1 acre and 2 acres of land at river. And so I am comfortable that this oversight committee is going to deal with disputes. And as I said, if it doesn't work after they have used their best efforts, then it goes to mediation, and if that doesn't work, then the next obvious place will be to the high courts. So there are 2 things that we need to note, that the oversight committee really is to manage disputes, but the small people are not left out, because the management by the BADMC, the management that will be in place is going to take care of all of those small people who currently are the ones suffering because there's no legislation to deal with the situation. So I hope that clarifies, and we can always have our conversation thereafter to make sure that I do what is right by you, because my first political footprints took place in St. Philip North. So, Mr. Speaker, with that being said, sir, I beg to move that
Second time.
this bill be read a second time.
Questions that the bill be ready a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair for further consideration for this House, to be formed into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolves itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This Honourable House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 do stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 3 stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 4 stand part.
The question is that Clause 4 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 5 stand part.
The question is that Clause 5 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 6.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 6 stand part.
The question is that Clause 6 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 7.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 7 stand part.
The question is that Clause 7 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 8.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 8 stand part.
The question is that Clause 8 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 9.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 9 stand part.
The question is that Clause 9 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 10.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 10 stand part.
The question is that Clause 10 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 11.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 11 stand part.
The question is that Clause 11 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 12.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 12 stand part.
The question is that Clause 12 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 13.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 13 stand part.
The question is that Clause 13 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 14.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 14 stand part.
The question is that Clause 14 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 15.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 15 stand part.
The question is that Clause 15 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 16.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 16 stand part.
The question is that Clause 16 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
First schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the first schedule be the schedule to the bill. The first schedule to the bill.
The question is that the first schedule will be the schedule of the bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Second schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
The question is that the second schedule will be the second schedule of the bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Third schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the third schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the third schedule will be the third schedule of the bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you don't report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable members for St. Philip South. The question is that the bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Three Houses Spring Management and Control Act 2023.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the... Oh, sorry.
Honourable Leader is the second bill.
Order number 11, sir. In the name of the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Nutritional Security, to move the second reading of the Barbados Agricultural Development and Marketing Corporation Amendment Bill 2023.
Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Mr. Speaker, the amendment to the CAP 254 was basically for us to be able to introduce a management system within the BADMC for management and control, sir, of the Three Houses Spring and Three Houses Plantation. This was meant all to be part of this debate, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, this being a cognate debate, the Cap 254 amendment, sir, I beg to move that the amendment would also form part of this.
No, you have to move that the bill be read a second time.
I beg to move that the bill be read a second time.
Question is that the bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Honourable member for St. Philip South. Leave it here. Permission for it.
Pardon?
You go leave it.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you now leave the chair for this House to resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that the Speaker do now leave the chair for the House to resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favor, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Barbados Agricultural Development and Marketing Corporation Amendment Act be now passed and so cited.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Thank
Honourable
you.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we've now officially come to the end of today's sitting, and I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until next Tuesday, the 23rd of May at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honourable chairman be adjourned until Tuesday, the 23rd day of May at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 23rd day of May, 2023 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.